Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavati Ramastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us, may he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Peace, peace, peace. And good evening. This evening we're going to break a little bit from our usual format. We may get to some of the reading from Swami Vivekananda in his chapter on Durga, but we're going to start with some other selections on Durga. And of course, the reason we're doing this is that next Wednesday starts Navaratri. And of course, we encourage everyone to do extra Durga or their own mantra as japam during that 10-day period. And we'll be having Durga Puja online only in Santa Barbara. And so anyway, it's a big time for the celebration of the Divine Mother. So we thought we would start with first some selections from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna when he mentions Durga, and then some selections from some of the other direct disciples, what they said about Durga or experiences they had of the Divine Mother. So we're going to start with the Gospel. So this is Atma Chaitanya. He's going to read a few selections for us.
The characteristic of tamas is pride. Pride and delusion come from tamas. It is said in the Purana that Havana had an excess of rajas, kumbhakama of tamas, Vibhishana of sattva. That is why Vibhishana was able to receive the grace of Rama. Another characteristic of tamas is anger. Through anger, one loses one's wits, cannot distinguish between right and wrong. In a fit of anger, Hanuman set fire to Lanka without thinking for a moment that the fire might also burn down the hut where Sita lived. Still another feature of tamas is lust. Govindra Ghosh of Patragata once remarked, since you cannot get rid of your passions, your lust, your anger, and so on, give them a new direction. Instead of desiring worldly pleasures, desire God. Have intercourse with Brahman. If you cannot get rid of anger, then change its direction. Assume the tamasic attitude of bhakti and say, what? I have repeated the hallowed name of Durga, and shall I not be liberated? How can I be a sinner anymore? How can I be bound anymore? If you cannot get rid of temptation, direct it toward God. Be infatuated with God's beauty. If you cannot get rid of pride, then be proud to say that you are the servant of God. You are the child of God. Thus turn the six passions toward God.
Yeah, so we're going to find in these passages from the Gospel an emphasis on repeating the name of Durga or repeating any divine name. So that's, of course, one of the features that Sri Ramakrishna did emphasize a lot. And, of course, his message is always very hopeful to everybody. We're not expected to all start out perfect, you know. We all have our little idiosyncrasies and faults, but through spiritual practices, we can overcome those. And so this is one of his main features. Let's read another selection from the Gospel.
It was evening. A lamp was burning in Sri Ramakrishna's room. The devotees and visitors were sitting at a distance. The master was introspective. Those in the room were also thinking of God and sat in silence.
I guess they were practicing social distancing back then. Okay.
A few minutes afterwards, Narendra entered the room with a friend whom he introduced to the master as an author. Sri Ramakrishna talked with him about the metaphysical significance of Radha and Krishna. The author said that Radha and Krishna were the supreme Brahman. Vishnu, Shiva, Durga, and the other deities had sprung from them.
So this is a typical Vaishnava position, of course, that everything is going to come from Krishna, or in this case, Krishna and Radha. Okay, let's go on.
The master spoke. That's good. There are different aspects of Radha. In her seductive aspect, she was Chandavali. In her aspect of love, she participated in Sri Krishna's Leela at Vrindavan. Nanda Ghosh, Krishna's foster father, had the vision of the eternal Radha. First is the seductive Radha, then the Radha of love. If you go farther, you will see the eternal Radha. It's like taking off the layers of an onion, one by one. First the red layers, then the pink, and then the white. Afterwards, you don't find any more layers. Such is the nature of the eternal Radha, Radha the Absolute. There, the discrimination following the process of not tills, not this, not this, comes to an end. There are two aspects of Radha Krishna, the absolute and the relative.
So again, we also see the universal nature of Sri Ramakrishna's teachings and how he accepted all sorts of different points of view as valid ways of looking at things. This would not have been his typical way of looking at things, but since this author presented it, he said, yes, that's fine. You can look at it that way too. So he's illustrating the things that Swami Vivekananda brought out in the last couple of times we met here together about education and how you go with whatever people, wherever people are, and you lead them forward from there. So, and of course, in this case, he was, he would put Mother Kali and Durga as the primary focus of attention, but this person was picking Radha and Krishna as the primary focus and identifying them with the Supreme Brahman. And then, that was fine with him as well. All right, we'll read another selection here from the Gospel.
Later, Sri Ramakrishna was seated in his room in his usual blissful mood. Ishan had come from Calcutta. He had burning faith in God. He used to say, if a man leaves the house with the hallowed name of Durga on his lips, then Shiva himself protects him with the celestial weapons.
So that's why we all often will chant Durga, Durga, Durga as someone leaves or when we're leaving on a trip. So, all right, Master again.
The Master turned to Ishan. Your great faith, but I haven't so much. Everybody laughs. God can be realized only through faith.
All right, now we have another selection.
Monday, September 29, 1884. It was the third day of the Durga Puja. The Master had been awake in his room at Dakshineshwar since early morning. The morning worship in the Kali temple was over, and the orchestra had played the morning melodies in the Nahabat. Brahmins and gardeners, breakfast basket in hand, were plucking flowers for the worship of the Divine Mother. Bhavanath, Bhavaram, Niranjan, and M had spent the night at Dakshineshwar, sleeping on the porch of the Master's room. As soon as they awoke, they saw Sri Ramakrishna dancing in an ecstatic mood. He was chanting, "Victory to Mother Durga. Hallowed be the name of Durga." He looked like a child as he chanted the name of the blissful mother. After a few moments, he said, "Oh, the bliss of divine ecstasy. of the bliss of divine drunkenness.
Yes, so again, this is motivation for us to remember to do our extra Durga Japam during the Navaratri, and then try to make that a habit. Try to increase the amount, your capacity for doing Japam, because Sri Ramakrishna emphasized that over and over and over again. Now he's going to repeat the same idea about having complete faith in repeating the name and how it wipes out your sins. You want to read some more? If you want me to read, just say so.
Yeah, you go ahead.
A man should have such fiery faith as to be able to say, I have uttered the name of God. How can I be a sinner? Imagine a man repeating the name of Hari day and night, and at the same time saying that he is a sinner. So saying, Sri Ramakrishna became overwhelmed with divine ecstasy and sang this song. This song shows up a few times in the gospel, in various snippets of it, sometimes longer and sometimes shorter. If only I can pass away repeating Durga's name, how canst thou then, O Blessed One, withhold from me deliverance, wretched though I may be? I may have stolen a drink of wine, or killed a child unborn, or slain a woman or a cow, or even caused a Brahman's death. But though it all be true, nothing of this can make me feel the least uneasiness, for though the power of thy sweet name, my wretched soul may still aspire even to Brahmanhood. Manilal says, if you were not unwell, you could visit the, this is another section. So anyway, so that song illustrates that extreme position of how one can be purified of their sins by repeating God's name. Not recommending that one go quite that far, but anyway, I'm sure. Yeah, but you know, we're always put in less than ideal circumstances, and as much as we try to live up to ideals, it's in the realm of Maya, it's almost impossible to always be able to actually execute those ideals, like truthfulness. It always makes me feel so uneasy when you're ordering a new app or a new program or something, and you go on the internet and you have to agree that you've read these 15 pages of tiny type of stuff that it's in all legalese that you probably don't understand even if you read it, and you have to click that you've read it and agree to it. When I almost never read at all, but I still click that I've read it and agree to it. So this idea of always being truthful, we try to do that, but there are circumstances sometimes when we don't actually do it, and we probably don't even think that we're not doing it in cases like that. We've gotten so used to it. So anyway, it's good to know that we can chant God's name and not worry about not being able to be absolutely perfect all the time. All right, so we're going to talk about the Master and how he often would be reminded of the Divine Mother by various things. Do you feel like reading?
Manilal speaks, if you were not unwell, you could visit the exhibition in the Maidan. Master, well, I shan't be able to see everything even if I go. Perhaps my eyes will fall on some certain thing, and I shall become unconscious. Then I shall not be able to see the rest. I was taken to the zoological garden. I went into samadhi at the sight of the lion. The curior of the mother awakened in my mind the consciousness of the mother herself. In that state, you could see the other animals. I had to return home after seeing only the lion. Hence, Jadu Malik's mother first suggested that I should go to the exhibition, and then said I should not.
So this is actually a nice reminder of how we can try to see God in everything. We often think, we don't have time for spiritual practice, and how can I keep my mind on God? But if we look at things with a new set of eyes, lots of things can remind us of the divine. So in this case, seeing an animal like the lion. And of course, we can see even in a little cat. Little cats sometimes look like little lions. And so we can think, well, this is just a little lion. And so it's a miniature version of the vehicle for the Divine Mother. And so Swami Shraddhananda, who was the head of the Sacramento Center for several decades, was very good at that. And he loved going to the zoo, and he loved going to the botanical garden because he would often think of God in all sorts of ways and think of how God is manifesting in all these different forms. I think I'll read a little bit. The fear of the devotees flies away if they but seek shelter at the feet of the Divine Mother. Was that why the Master sang the following song? I have surrendered my soul at the fearless feet of the Mother. Am I afraid of death anymore? Unto the tuft of my hair on my head is tied the almighty mantra, Mother Kali's name. My body I have sold in the marketplace of the world, and with it have bought Sri Durga's name. Deep within my heart I have planted the name of Kali, the wish-fulfilling tree of heaven. When Yama, king of death, appears, to him I shall open my heart and show it growing there. I have cast out from me my 6 unflagging foes. Ready am I to sail life's sea, crying, to Durga, victory. So another strong statement of the power of the divine name in another one of these songs. And of course, Kali and Durga, Kali is an aspect of Durga. So it gets a little complicated how sometimes when we, especially if you're not used to these ideas, that the idea of the Divine Mother comes in all sorts of different forms. And then each of these has a certain persona of their own, as well as being part of the total persona of the great Devi. And Durga is usually associated with the great Devi. Do you want to read a section?
Master, you do not accept God with form. That is all right. The image is not meant for you. For you, it is good to deepen your feeling toward your own ideal. From the worshippers of the personal God, you should learn their yearning, for instance, Sri Krishna's attraction for Radha. You should learn from the worshippers of the personal God their love for their chosen ideal. When the believers in the personal God worship the images of Kali and Durga, with what feeling they cry from the depths of their souls, Mother, oh Mother, how much they love the deity. You should accept that feeling. You don't have to accept the image.
Yeah, so again, Radha and Krishna is being very accepting of other people's ideas and sort of bringing in other ways that they can incorporate spiritual practice and not denigrate other people's practices, but learn from them and get something out of them, even though it might not be their particular way. You know, speaking of how you see God in everything, John Dobson was another good example of that. He talked very advoitically much of the time, and one might have gotten the idea that he wasn't interested in the personal aspects, but then he would also suddenly bring that in. He would talk about how the universe is the Divine Mother at work, how she manifests this and how she does that, and how clever she is at putting the universe together in this particular way. And so just from looking at the physics, he was thinking of the Divine Mother and how clever she is at putting the universe together this way. The Brahmo said, how does one cultivate the spirit of dispassion? Why don't all attain it? And the Master said, dispassion is not possible unless there is satiety through enjoyment. You can eat. Satiety, fullness. In other words, you've already fulfilled desires and you're not hankering after desires. You've gotten tired of them. You know, there was somebody was describing their experience. I think it was one of these diet programs where they were trying to get people to stop craving sweets, and they would make them eat a whole bunch of chocolate, but not sweetened chocolate, and so that they got to not like the taste of chocolate. So that would be satiety, just too much of it. You can't take it anymore. You can easily cajole a small child with candies or toys, but after eating the candies and finishing its play, it cries, "I want to go to my mother." Unless you take the child to its mother, it will throw away the toy and scream at the top of its voice. All right, you want to take a turn?
This universe is created by the Mahamaya of God. Mahamaya contains both Vijamaya, the illusion of knowledge, and Avidyamaya, the illusion of ignorance. To the help of Vijamaya, one cultivates such virtues as the taste for holy company, knowledge, devotion, love, and renunciation. Avidyamaya consists of the 5 elements and the objects of the 5 senses: form, flavor, smell, touch, and sound. These make one forget God.
Yes, I frequently bring that up when I'm talking to a school class or something and describing Hinduism, and talk about how the senses direct our attention outside, and so our task is to direct our attention back inside. Varmo says after that, if the power of Vidya is the cause of ignorance, then why has God created it? The Master says, that is his play. The glory of light cannot be appreciated without darkness. Happiness cannot be understood without misery. Knowledge of good is possible because of the knowledge of evil. And this, of course, is brought up many times in the Chandi, too, the Devi Mahatmyam, which is the sort of the Shakta textbook. It brings out how the Divine Mother is the source of both ignorance and liberation. So this is a common theme, because she is the power of Maya, and yet she also can bring liberation. You want to read a paragraph?
Then the Master said, even for thy holy name I have no taste. The typhoid patient has very little chance of recovery if he loses all taste for food. But his life need not be despaired of if he enjoys food even a little. That is why one should cultivate a taste for God's name. Any name will do: Durga, Krishna, or Shiva. Then, if through the chanting of the name one's attachment to God grows day by day, and joy fills the soul, one has nothing to fear. The delirium will certainly disappear. The grace of God will certainly descend.
Yes, so Ramakrishna again is emphasizing that power of japa. If you wanted to summarize the gospel, I think that's probably one of the primary teachings that Ramakrishna emphasized. To Pran Krishna, he says, Brahman and Shakti are inseparable. Unless you accept Shakti, you will find the whole universe unreal. I, you, house, buildings, and family. The world stands solid because the primordial energy stands behind it. If there is no supporting pole, no framework can be made, and without the framework, there can be no beautiful image of Durga. All right, let's see. How's our time? Let's skip some of these. Can we skip a couple pages forward? Let's see. Can we skip over to the advice to householders? Do you see that? There we go. Yeah, let's read a little of that.
Okay. Did you have any holiday during the Durga Puja? And M replies, yes, sir. I went to Keshav's house every day for the first 3 days of the worship. Was that so? I heard there a very interesting interpretation of the Durga Puja. Please tell me all about it. Keshav Sen held daily morning prayers in his house, lasting till 10 or 11. During these prayers, he gave the inner meaning of the Durga Puja. He said that if anyone could realize the Divine Mother, that is to say, could install Mother Durga in the shrine of his heart, then Lakshmi, Sarasvati, Kartika, and Ganesha would come there of themselves. Lakshmi means wealth, Sarasvati knowledge, Kartika strength, and Ganesha success. By realizing the Divine Mother within one's heart, one gets all these without any effort whatever. According to Hindu mythology, Lakshmi and Sarasvati are the daughters, and Kartika and Ganesha, the sons of Durga. Associated with the image of Durga, they occupy positions on both sides of the Divine Mother.
Yeah, so that's a wonderful idea that you see that each deity that one might concentrate on is actually representative of a whole panoply of archetypal energies. And the mythology will then break these up into different images and frequently call them either aspects or children of the main deity. So in this case, they're referring to Lakshmi and Saraswati as daughters and Kartikeya and Ganesha as the sons of Durga. Of course, now if you're looking at the mythologies along with Shiva, then it might be Parvati that's that's the mother of Kartikeya Ganesha, but Parvati is just another aspect of the Divine Mother, just another name. So it gets a little complicated if you're not used to this changing of names all the time. But really the Divine Mother is one, and we call her by different names in different situations. So let's see, shall we read a little of Vivekananda?
All right.
Want me to read a little?
I can read.
Okay.
If in his acts of creation, God is dependent on good and evil karmas, then what does it avail us to worship him? There's a fine song of Naresh Chandra where occurs the following. If what lies in one's destiny is to happen anyhow, O Mother, then what good all this invoking by the holy name of Durga? True, it is improper to hold many texts on the same subject to be contradicted by one or two, but why then are the long-continued customs of Madhuparka and the like repealed? Is that repealed or repeated?
Yeah, I think repeated, probably.
Repeated by one of two such texts as the horse sacrifice, the cow sacrifice, sannyasa, meat offerings, and shraddha. If the Vedas are eternal, then what are the meaning and justification of such specifications as this rule of Dharma is for the age of Vipara, this for the age of Kali, and so forth? The same God who gives out the Vedas becomes Buddha again to annul them. Which of these dispensations is to be obeyed? Which of these remains authoritative, the earlier or the later one? The Tantra says in the Kali Yuga, the Veda mantras are futile. So which behest of God, the Shiva, is to be followed?
Yeah. So this is an important point that sometimes spiritual traditions do take up different particular rules and so forth. And you have to keep in mind the main goal. The main goal is to be able to keep your mind on God, to purify your mind, and to become a better person. So the particular injunctions of this and that and the other aren't necessarily as important as the keeping the goal in mind, which injunctions seem to work for you in your particular place and time. Let's see. All right, the disciple then said, this is sort of questions and answers of Vivekananda, I think. Disciple, what will you do with the smriti of Raghuandan? Swamiji says, this time I have a desire to celebrate the Durga Puja, the worship of the goddess Durga. If the expenses are forthcoming, I shall worship the Mahamaya. Therefore, I have a mind to read the ceremonial forms of that worship. When you come to the Mat next Sunday, you must bring a copy of the book with you. Disciple, all right, sir. Next Saturday, the disciple brought a copy of the book, and Swamiji was much pleased to get it. Meeting the disciple a week after this, he said, I have finished the Raghuandan Smriti presented by you. If possible, I shall celebrate the Durga Puja of the Divine Mother. The Durga Puja took place with great eclat at the proper time. Shortly after this, Swamiji performed a homa before the Mother Kali at the Kali Ghat. Referring this incident, he spoke to the disciple, well, I was glad to see that there was yet a liberality of view at Kali Ghat. The temple authorities did not object in the least to my entering the temple, though they knew that I was a man who had returned from the West. On the contrary, they very cordially took me into the holy precincts and helped me to worship the Mother to my heart's content. You see, 150 years ago, if you were living in the Indian subcontinent and you crossed the ocean, you were then considered a mlecha. You had lost your caste. And so the fact that Swami Vivekananda came to the West and came back quite triumphantly and was accepted by the people was a huge change in mental mindset, you could say, of the people of India to the better. And of course, Gandhi later also was educated in the West and then came back to India and was quite famous and influential. So that changed at about this time, that no longer were people that left the Indian subcontinent, were they considered to be outcasts or mlechas. Let's see, do you want to read a little?
Then the following conversation took place between Swamiji and the disciple. Swamiji, I think that it will be better if from now the anniversary is celebrated in a different way. The celebration should extend to 4 or 5 days instead of 1. On the first day, there may be study and interpretation of scriptures. On the second, discussion on the Vedas and the Vedanta and the solution of the problems in connection with them. On the third day, there may be a question class. The fourth day may be fixed for lectures. And on the last day, there will be a festival on the present lines. This will be like the Durga Puja, extending over 4 or 5 days. Of course, if the celebration is on the above lines, none but the devotees of Radha and Krishna will be able to attend on the other days, except the last. But that does not matter. A large promiscuous crowd of people does not mean a great propagation of the message of Radha and Krishna. The disciple, sir, it's a beautiful idea. Next time, it will be done according to your wishes.
Yeah, there are many different ways that people in India celebrate the Durga Puja. Some will do something on all 9 days. Some will do the last 3 days. Usually it's thought of as one for Saraswati, one for Lakshmi, one for Kali. So then the last day might be for the Devi altogether. So there are all sorts of ways. And when I go to my work at USC and talk to the students there, they often share what they did when they were in India in their home. And they come from all over. And, we've got them from the South India and from Gujarat and from North India, the Punjab, and from Bengal and Bihar and almost every state you can think of. And each one is a little bit different. Some of them are coming from the cities, big cities, most of them from the big cities, but every once in a while you'll get somebody from a little small village town somewhere, and describing how they would celebrate the different celebrations. So it's interesting how that, and he's sort of laid out yet another way of celebrating the Durga Puja. Of course, Navaratri comes from the idea of 9 days, and there are a couple of interpretations of that as well, that there are 9 main aspects of the Divine Mother. And so sometimes it's thought of 3 times 3, so there's sort of 3 aspects of 3 aspects, and you get 9 aspects. So it gets a little complicated, and there are lots of different names and terms for all these different aspects, but they're all just energies of the one Divine Mother. Now we're not going to get to everything that we wanted to get to tonight, but it's interesting, I think, to see how this analysis goes, and yet sometimes if people analyze things too much, it begins to be kind of intellectual, and they begin, well, are these gods and goddesses just kind of mental constructs of human beings? I don't think we can really take that position when you know that, let's see if this is, yeah, we've got, let's skip over a little bit to, from the life and teachings of Swami Vivekananda, a couple pages. Of course, in your Kindle, it's going to be a few more pages. But both Swami Vivekananda and Swami Brahmananda were well known for having many visions. And so we find that they have visions of various aspects of the Divine Mother. So do you find that? Mm-hmm. All right, let's read the one about Swami Vivekananda.
Sri Ramakrishna told the future Swami Vivekananda, "Do you know why I love you so much? You are all my own. Divine Mother has asked me to love you all." Swami Vivekananda said, "Oh, how great was the Master's love. How deep was his concern for us. In the event of our keeping away for a few days at a stretch, he would send for us through someone or make inquiries about us." Sri Ramakrishna told him to remain unmarried. "You are earmarked for the Divine Mother's work. You'll have to do much for her. A fruit which is pecked by a crow cannot be offered to the Divine Mother." Swami Vivekananda's holy body was consigned to the waters at Triveni. It was here at this confluence that Mother Triveni had appeared before him one day in the form of a girl while he had been bathing. She had raised her head over the water, showed him her 3 braids with her own hand, smiled, and then vanished in the water again. One day at Allahabad, after he had taken a dip at the holy confluence of the Ganges, Yamuna, and Sarasvati, he had a vision of Mother Triveni in the shape of a beautiful girl who raised her head above the water, showed him the 3 braids of her hair, and again disappeared into the water. On another day, while returning to the ashram after bathing at the confluence, he saw the same figure. She was proceeding ahead of me with the 3 braids dangling on her back.
Yeah, so of course the Triveni is where the 3 rivers originally came together. The Saraswati River has gone dry, and you can still see evidence of it through airplane images, and you can see that where the river used to be, and they can detect underground water in that same region. So it's become an underground river, but thousands of years ago, it was an actual river. And so the Triveni means the 3 veins or 3 rivers coming together at that particular spot, and it's considered a very holy spot. And so here Swami Vivekananda is actually seeing a vision of a goddess figure that has 3 braids. I mean, obviously you have to have 3 in order to braid. You can't braid with 2. It takes 3. So it's not just a fiction or some sort of construct of an artist or something like that, but God is able to take these forms for the sake of the devotees. So if we take that attitude, we can see that Brahman is the infinite, undivided, unchanging, but takes forms to satisfy the needs of the devotees. So one wonders, how does that work? And exactly, well, I'm not sure I can explain that, but I can tell you how I look at it to sort of make sense of it. It seems to me that our consciousness is a reflection of the cosmic consciousness. So in some sense, we all are tied into the cosmic consciousness. Each country then also has a sort of collective consciousness. Jung talked about the collective unconscious, but I would call this more of a collective consciousness. And so for the people in a particular region, God will appear in a particular form that relates to the people of that time. That's why you find, if you look at comparative mythology, someone like Joseph Campbell would do, where he would look at the mythologies of all over the world and see similarities, and yet there's still differences, and the differences are cultural. When you look at images of Durga, or when you hear about visions of gods and goddesses, they are dressed in ways that reflect that particular culture in that time, not some other culture. You get this with the Virgin Mary, too. You get people having visions of the Virgin Mary in different countries, and she looks like the people that she's trying to relate to, not like some foreigner. And so God comes in the form that relates to the people that the visions are meant for. And so it's a way that the collective consciousness sort of guides the manifestation, you could say, of the divine. So let's end with this last quote from the Eternal Companion, which talks about a vision of Swami Brahmananda and the reason we now celebrate Durga Puja at our Vedanta centers here and also the Ramakrishna Order centers in India. Okay.
Maharaj spent most of his later life in a state of high spiritual consciousness, coming down only in order to teach and help us. His awareness of God had become so habitual that he would experience mystical visions even while conscious of the external world around him. He rarely spoke of these visions, and when he did so, it was only to his brother Swamis or disciples. I shall record a few of them in this chapter. It was the year 1901, a few days before the annual worship of Durga God, the Mother, in her aspect of protectress of the universe. Maharaj was sitting on the bank of the Ganges at the Bellar Mutt. Suddenly he saw Mother Durga walking on the surface of the Ganges toward the monastery grounds. She passed under the sacred vilwa tree in the monastery garden and then disappeared. A moment later, Swamiji arrived by boat and came to Maharaj and said, "Raja, make arrangements at once for the worship of Mother Durga." Then he told Maharaj that he had had a vision and had seen Mother Durga being worshipped at the monastery. Maharaj, in turn, described his own vision to Swamiji and began at once to prepare for the worship. Since that date, the special worship of Mother Durga has been held every year at the Bellar Monastery. Maharaj also performed the worship at the monasteries in Kakal, Benares, and Madras. He once told the Kilananda that he performed this worship in obedience to the Mother's direct command. The Kilananda records that during the Durga festival in Madras, the power of Maharaj was specially felt by his disciples. Their minds were raised to higher levels of spirituality. Thus, the hymn makes us acquainted with two other names of Durga.
Okay, that's another section. Missing a period there. Anyway, so that's, as I said, the historical reason why the worship of Durga became commonplace in all of our centers, because both Swami Brahmananda and Swami Vivekananda had visions of Mother Durga at almost exactly the same time in slightly different ways. But because of that, the worship of Durga Puja has been done ever since. So again, these deities appear to these great ones. Swami Akhilananda, for those who aren't familiar, was the head of the Boston and Providence centers for many decades in the early years, probably one of the founding, I don't know, was he the founder of those centers? I can't remember. But anyway, he was one of the early swamis that during the 30s and 40s and 50s probably, perhaps a little longer, I don't remember when he passed away. Probably longer, because I think he came to some of these services and so forth. Anyway, he was a Swami that later had come to the West and spent many decades here. I was lucky enough to attend the opening Durga Puja at Santa Barbara when I was a little kid. I think it was 1956, as I remember, when they dedicated the temple in Santa Barbara, and they did it on Durga Puja. So we always do our Durga Puja at Santa Barbara for that reason. That's their sort of founding day, you could say. The convent had existed for some time before that, but the temple had not been built until 1956 by a very famous architect named Luda Riggs. She's, in fact, they still have architectural tours of Santa Barbara, and the temple is included because Luda Riggs was quite well known. Of course, she's long ago passed away, but anyway, so that's a little historical reference. Unfortunately, this year it will be online only, but hopefully you can appreciate the ambiance of the beautiful temple in Santa Barbara, even over the internet. All right, so I wanted to include these ideas because Swami Vedanta lecture on Durga gets very technical and very historical and goes into the details of the different aspects of Durga and the historical references to early worships and early forms of Durga and so forth. And so I wanted us to have this more personal approach before we got into the details. And then now the details become interesting because you've got a little context for it. And we realize that the divine feminine energy manifests in ways that are useful to the people in the time and place that the visions come. All right, let's close with a chant. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace. And thank you for joining us. So let's mark where we were.